Hello, everyone. Welcome to our brand new show, Why It's So Messy in the Middle, which is a whole new podcast that we're introducing as part of Handmade Seller Magazine. Some of you will probably have seen our Now What show, which is for our early stage artisans. But we also know that once you've been in business a few years, it starts getting messy. The love kind of runs out around some aspects of your business, and it just gets more challenging. So, this podcast is here to start to dive into that, why it's so messy in the middle, kind of what's happening. And then we're doing a really cool thing with why it's so messy in the middle. So, we're encouraging everybody watching this to go on our YouTube channel and add comments and suggestions to crowdsource thoughts for the artisan that we're featuring. So, for example, we're going to talk about some challenging topics around business. And if you think, oh, I have an idea they could think about, go onto our YouTube channel and add, could you think about blah? And add your comment. And so I'll be moderating all the comments so nobody gets to be mean or nasty to our wonderful artisans that are giving their time to talk about this. But we would love your feedback and comments and thoughts because you never know, you could just give an artisan their next great idea for their business. So now, without further ado, our first guest, our first brave soul coming on Why It's So Messy in the Middle is Nicole from Sweet Alabella. And Nicole, can you take a moment to introduce yourself to our audience and tell a little bit about your business?
Hi, Amber. Yes, my name's Nicole, and I'm the owner of Sweet Alabella. I make jewelry and other gifts. It's not just jewelry. I've kind of branched out a little bit into doing a few other things, but the main theme is nature, flora and fauna, pretty much, flowers, animals. And I work with a whole bunch of different type of materials. I can't stick to just one, and that's my problem. I like resin, I like gemstones, I make stuff out of cutlery, like antique silverware.
Mhm.
I broken dishes, pretty much anything I can, put my hands on. And it's and also I'm a photographer, so I used to have a photography business, and so now I've implemented that into making stickers and stuff like that out of my photos.
So you got a whole lot going on in your business, right? So you've got several different aspects to your creativity. You like to make a number of different things. How do you think that has made it challenging in marketing the business? Because you're so creative and trying different things, how do you feel like that's gone?
Oh, that's a mess. It's an absolute mess because I get all these ideas and I want to do this and I want to do that and I want to do this. And then it's like trying to compute it to being able to bring it to the customer is a whole different ballgame. So it's
Mhm.
like, okay, this is what this is. It has to match with this. And my brain's all over the place. But, you have to you have to bring it out to the customer to be, this is what I'm making now. And it has to kind of have a cohesion, and sometimes that's not easy to do.
Right. You have to find that through line, right? That unifying line that kind of, even though it's in a whole different set of areas, there's a bit of a unifying line. And it sounds like for you, the unifying line is really that whole flora, fauna, nature is really the theme.
Yes.
It just shows up in a different series of collections and different mediums
Yes.
with actually the things that you create. So now there's another aspect of your business that I think is very interesting, right? So a lot of artisans, they may start at a craft fair or they start wholesaling and trying to build up kind of stockist relationships, but you have some unique challenges that make that typical build a local audience and then kind of work from there challenging. So let's get into your location challenges.
Yes. So I'm a military spouse. My husband is active duty Army, and I've been a military spouse for 17 years now. So we have to relocate where the Army tells us to relocate. And
Mhm.
that puts a huge, it's probably one of my biggest obstacles because, when we go to move, it's not just moving. I mean, we have to a couple months in advance, and then sometimes we don't get all of our stuff until a couple, so usually for e-commerce I'd have to shut down my business for a couple of months. And so it's and not just that, but when you relocate all the stuff that goes along with the business, your LLC, your taxes, all that stuff, now I have to relocate that to a different state or a different wherever I am. And if I'm overseas, that's even worse. So it's extremely challenging, but there's so many military spouses that are entrepreneurs, so we just do it.
Absolutely. And now, something that you've done, I think, is a very unique approach to allowing you to continue to build your artisan business, even though you have to move around. So, let's get into the unique way you're approaching retail with Painted Tree. So, can you talk a little bit about how you came across Painted Tree, like how you the locations you've seen, a little more that you are aware of the history of Painted Tree?
Yes, definitely. So I was in a small business group online called Flourish, and there was talk of it in there. And I noticed I'm currently in Virginia, and there was one in Midlothian, Virginia that was going in, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm close to one of them. Let me go check this out because
Mhm.
it's a way for me to get offline and into the general area without having to do all the craft fair type stuff that
Mhm.
goes along with that. And so I started off with the one here in Midlothian, set up just like a little bookshelf, and it actually started doing really well. And so it in the back of my mind, I was like, oh my gosh, this is a way for me to have a permanent spot that's kind of passive, but not really, like
Right.
passive income. Because, there's a lot of work that still goes into it, but I don't have to be there to make the sale.
Correct.
Yes, they have
Exactly.
that check.
Exactly.
Yes.
Mhm.
And so then I went into the ones in Arizona because that's where my parents live. So I now have one in Chandler, Arizona, and Scottsdale, Arizona.
Mhm. And so Painted Tree, and we wrote about this in the Handmade Seller magazine actually last year as a unique retail model. Because, there's a number of paths to retail, and a lot of people think craft fair, wholesale, and they kind of think that but in some of these new and emerging models, and Painted Tree is one of them, it's a way for you to have your own as an artisan direct retail presence. So if you think about if people find you on your website, you can say stocked in these Painted Tree locations. So you send all your products to Painted Tree, or you can bring them in and merchandise yourself once you have the arrangement set up with Painted Tree. You can rent varying sizes of spaces. It's as small as a bookshelf to kind of a whole sort of much larger space. So it's retail within retail, basically, right? A space within a space. And so you pay a fee to have that, and then you can also start to expand your retail footprint because you can then grow into multiple locations, just like what you've done. So you can say, hey, I have retail in Chandler, I have retail in Scottsdale, and over time, as it makes sense for the business or as you find locations that really work, you can grow and expand via retail without having to do wholesale. And that is, I think, very unique because not everybody wants to deal with wholesale, because it's its own whole separate business. So I love that Painted Tree model, and they are growing really fast. So for anybody watching this, you can go take a look at their site. They have a lot of really good information on how it all works as well. So you started with a bookshelf, and what size do you have now in your Painted Tree locations?
So the one in Scottsdale, I have a corner booth, so I have a full booth in Scottsdale. And then in the Chandler location, I have a kiosk. So one of the ones that are kind of in the middle.
Hmm.
And trying to merchandise for both are a little bit different, but it's been a learning curve, but it's been good. Like it made me happy. It made my heart happy. I had my stuff in there, and I do buy wholesale that goes along with my handmade things to fill up the space. But they're also from other handmade sellers that
Hmm.
they wholesale to me, not me whole, because I don't think I could ever do wholesale to other people, but for them to do wholesale to me. and it makes this nice little boutique feel, and it made my business feel new again, if that makes
Ah.
any sense.
It does. It does. And so you take and your unique selling approach is you take your own things that you make, but then you round it out to make a more complete shopping experience by having wholesale from other artisans and you put all of that in Painted Tree. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct. That is correct. To make more of a boutique.
Hmm. And so that's a novel approach. And it isn't one that I've heard a lot of people talk about, right? That's a like, ooh, I don't have to make all of it, but I could round out the shopping experience and have people that catches more people's eye in Painted Tree, right? So now you have to think a little bit about the merchandising side of it too, right?
Yes,
In
that's been
in how
whole new.
that looks. And what was that learning curve like of starting to kind of figure that? So speak a little bit more to that. What was that process like?
Absolutely. So, online, you just put your stuff up, it's online, and there's a whole new thing for online because, they can't see it, they can't touch it. So you
Right.
have to, describe things a whole lot more. And then going from online to like actual merchandising in a store, it's like, oh, now I have to package this stuff differently and I have to arrange it differently. And I can't explain, it like I would online. So it was a huge learning curve, and a learning curve that I needed,
Hmm.
to grow my business just a little bit more. And at first I was like, well, I'll just do all my handmade stuff.
Hmm.
And then I started liking all these other, when I went on fair and stuff like that, to other wholesalers and, handmade wholesalers. And I was like, oh, I really want to carry that in the Painted Tree. And there was a hump for me that I had to get over. I think us makers do that, where it's just like,
Hmm.
no, I have to carry only my things. And then it was like, no, you don't. Like, nobody says that you have to do that. And I was like, I really like these things that go well with my things. And it's like, that's when you actually start making more money, to be honest with you. Because it gives people more of a variety. It gives more of a price point variety too. Like, I brought in some temporary
Hmm.
tattoos from some handmade sellers, and one that actually lived in the place I grew up in, come to find out. And I was like, ah, but she, just temporary tattoos. Like, she makes them and sells them on fair, and it goes well with my jewelry. Like,
Hmm.
and I don't just do temporary tattoos from other makers, but a whole other bunch of things. And it's the merchandising of it, and the planning out, like, okay, will this work with my stuff and for my target market? And it's becoming, it just makes me understand business a whole lot more, if that makes sense.
It does, and it also strikes me that it can be easy to think, okay, well, I need to create all of these complementary products to do that myself. Where you're like, no, 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 I buy things from other artisans to create that complementary set, and can still retail. And so it's a unique and novel approach, right? As opposed to you only have so much bandwidth to make yourself.
Yeah, I'm a military spouse that moves around. Not only that, but I'm a homeschooling mom,
Yep.
and my teenage daughter, and nobody's got time. I can't make that stuff to make it, myself. Like, I'd be making stuff from dawn till dusk in order to fill up spaces and fill up my online store, and fit, and so bringing in that wholesale aspect of buying it from other sellers, um, that evens that out and actually makes it a business and not a Nikki's just stressed out trying to make things.
Because I think we can all do that to ourselves a little bit, right?
Absolutely. I stress myself out on the daily. So,
So now, when you first started, you had said you'd started with photography and then you kind of started transitioning your business, right? So you've lived through different seasons of your business, right?
yes.
And it's been, oh, okay, now it's this, but then you start to realize, no, it's supposed to be this other thing. How did those transitions happen? Right? Because that's part of this messy middle of how did you know, I think it's time to start to transition? Was it based on sales? Was it based on ideas? Like, how did you know when it was time to start making different kinds of transitions in your business?
Well, and I talk about being a military spouse as if like it's a challenging thing, but it's also a good thing in that way because every
Okay.
time you move, you kind of get smarter and smarter about some things. And so the photography business I would do, I was in Colorado Springs at the time, and then we moved to Alabama, and I still continued it. But when it comes to a photography business, you have to be there to take pictures of people, right?
Yep.
And so I was getting myself into these communities that, they already had their photographer. Like they already knew their people. And I was just kind of an outsider. Being a military spouse, you're always an outsider. And
Hmm.
so it takes a good 3 to 4 years to build up a clientele as a photographer by word of mouth, by getting out there and doing things. And by the time I would build something, it was time to move again. So I was like, okay, this is ridiculous. Like, I love doing photography, but all I'm going to be doing is chasing that carrot that I'm never going to get. And so I loved making jewelry. I did that prior to photography, actually, and then stopped doing that, and then photography, and then came back to the jewelry. And it happened one day. I was just like, I'm making jewelry now. Like, that's when we were in Georgia. I was like, nah, this is what I'm going to do now. And so I started that, and that's morphed into whole different things. And now I'm making all these different types of jewelry and putting my photography into it. So I do think there's a reason for everything because I do my own product photography, and that's for e-commerce sellers. That's a hard thing because it's like
Yep.
product photography is a whole new ball game. Like, trust me, I was a portrait photographer, and learning product photography, I had to stretch too, because
Hmm.
it's a totally different thing photographing a family versus photographing a tiny little piece of jewelry. It's two very different photographies. So, but I already had the hand up by being a photographer,
Hmm.
so it kind
Hmm.
of helped. It really did.
And I think the other reality to in business is we often don't give ourselves enough credit for those first things that we try. If we decide we're going to make a transition in that messy middle, sometimes we're a little too hard on ourselves about it, as opposed to saying, here are the things I picked up and I learned from that and the skills that go forward into the next iteration of the business. And so having a lot of grace for yourself to say, oh, I had that photography business, but guess what? I move every so many years and I can't really build that clientele. Okay. You're like, but I could take all those skills from photography. Yes, I have to learn the product side, but I still have all those skills and I take that into that next business. And then that takes some of the uncertainty in that business out. And so I think for a lot of us too, we can beat ourselves up about the things that we perceive maybe didn't work, as opposed to take a few lessons from that piece that did work. More might have been there than you gave yourself credit for, right?
Yes, and it's sometimes the brightest ideas come out of necessity. So like, okay, I've been given this problem. What am I going to do now? So, and sometimes that gives you the best ideas where you're just like, oh yeah, I could do this. And it just kind of rolling with it, and it evolves. And so I'm one of those people that is like, it's meant to be that way. That it happened for a reason, I think I was on that path.
Hmm. So, what do you feel like is the messiest part for you right now? Right? You've evolved your business, you've got your stuff in kind of painted tree. What feels like it's messy right now in your business?
Oh, there's multiple things, but I would say the messiest part is where to put. It's like I've got so many moving parts at this point that it's
Hmm.
like, where do I put my focus? Because for a while I've been putting my focus into the painted tree, getting that stuff. Because I mean, you have to realize you're one human being. Like, you cannot do
Right.
all the things. So I haven't been putting as much stuff into my e-commerce because I'm on my own website, and then I'm on a platform called Spousely, which is for military affiliated people. So the vendors are all military, and I've been on Spousely for a couple of years now too, and it's kind of like Etsy meets Angie's List for,
Hmm.
so anybody can buy from it, but you have to be military or first responder affiliated in order to be a vendor. And
Ah.
so I haven't been putting stuff on both of those shops as much because I'm putting all my stuff into the painted tree. And like tomorrow, I've got a craft fair. So it's like, focus, Nikki, because like I have a hard time. Like you sit down to do it, and it's one of those freeze things where you're just like, I've got so much on my plate because I've got so much stuff I have to do for taxes, and then I have to get this stuff wholesaled, and I've got to get this stuff made, and and then I've got a life on top of it. And now you're just like, then you just like sit down, like you come home from running an errand, you're like, I don't know what to do right now because everything needs to be done. And sometimes you go through that freeze phase
Mm-hmm.
where
Mm-hmm.
you're just like, and then you do eventually pick it, it's just you just pick something and then you start doing it and then the ball starts rolling again. But it's
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure out what needs to be done next
Mm-hmm.
because you're not used to when you first start your business. It's like I have a little shop on Etsy. It's pretty
Right.
straightforward. Like
Yep.
I'm putting my stuff on Etsy, somebody buys it, I market it, all done. And now it's just like, in order to grow a business, though, you have to have multiple income streams.
That's
So
correct.
it's like, now I've got the painted tree, now I got this, which it's all good things, but sometimes you get stuck there and be like, okay, right now I don't feel like I have any direction as to what's more important to
Mm-hmm.
do.
Mm-hmm.
If that any of
I
that makes sense, I feel like I just rambled a whole bunch of stuff.
No, actually it does. And so a question we'd pose to our audience or people watching this, when you have multiple things, which is great because most of us need multiple streams to survive, how do you get yourself out of that natural overwhelm or freeze phase into that next step? This is not about discipline because I hate that word because I think that's just a way to beat people up and make people wrong. But it's about how do you, does anybody have tips or thoughts on making that transition for her easier when that freeze phase hits? So if anybody has, oh, I know somebody's got ideas on this because they're like, hey, you know what worked for me? Could
Yeah,
you do
exactly.
this? And that's what you're looking for. And
Yes.
sometimes it's unorthodox things that actually
Yeah, I
get
never
you
would have
moving
thought of
forward.
that. Yeah.
So that is a great place of because I do think that's messy. I have the same thing for the publication. Well, do I focus on this? Do I focus on this? Do I focus on this? I'm like, oh yeah, don't forget social media.
Yeah, well, forget that one because that's a big one, and social media is a whole beast of it itself. Where it's just like, oh my gosh, is this even obtainable? You know what I mean? I think every single small business person can tell you they go through periods on social media where it's just like, what am I doing?
Oh, I
I
sometimes I just feel like I'm screaming into the void. I'm like,
Yes,
because then the algorithms change, and I'm like, is anybody even seeing this anymore? Like you
yeah, and I'm
start
like 5 changes behind.
like I didn't adjust to the last algorithm change is fine. I'm just gonna do a post. I know I'm supposed to do stories or reels, but I don't know.
I know, but I don't know where in the day I'm going to find. And people say to batch, and I'm like, I'm not even sometimes like I don't even know what I'm going to eat tomorrow. Like friends, I can't batch right now. Like
It's it's way more honest, right? It's like
in
it's
a perfect world, we'd all be batching, but
in a perfect world, exactly. I'm the same way. In a perfect world, I would have all of this organized, and certain days of the month, I would have it all perfectly aligned, and I don't. And how
yeah,
about I just not pretend I do anymore?
yeah.
I
Some
just
people
don't.
do. Some people they're good at it.
Some
I'm
people are
not going to
great
be
at
that.
it.
Yeah.
But then the other reality too is that people are like, well, just hire someone. I'm like, well, not every
Yeah,
business
I
has
can't do
the
that
revenue to
either.
do that. But that's not always the answer either.
No,
Because even if you can, you have to manage all of it and queue it all up for the person doing it.
well, and
And
it's that
so,
one person that doesn't do it right. And actually, if you don't hire right, and that one, especially like a social media manager, and they put something up that isn't part of your ethics or your like, they can ruin your business. They can legit ruin your business. So
right.
where you're like, no, that's not my ethics, or that's not something I would ever post up. Like that's stuff that I steer clear from.
Yep. Exactly. And so that process too. So small business is inherently complicated, right?
Oh,
And that's why it is so messy. And we're all always trying to kind of carve out, where are we going with this thing and how does it fit in our life? And that's a big piece of, as I thought about, it can be really easy to give up when you kind of can't figure out where it's supposed to fit in life. And all these people around you are asking you, what are you doing with that thing? Right? And is that just like a pet over there? Or what what is that? You're like, I'm trying to figure that out.
no. To it. I also need sleep and sustenance.
Well, exactly, right? Yes, at the same time. So, well, this has been so fun talking about why it's messy in the middle, for your business. Hopefully, it's been fun for you as well, and getting
Yes,
into.
I've enjoyed it. Thank you for
y-
asking me
y-
to do it.
Yes, absolutely. And now, why don't you share with the people that are following along how they can find you on the socials, websites, etc.?
Yes. So, my website is sweetellabella.com, www.sweetellabella.com. My Instagram is sweetellabella underscore crystals. Um, because I used to do more with gemstones, and then it just exploded everywhere. So at some point, I'm going to have to change that. But Sweet Ellabella underscore crystals. I'm also on Pinterest, Facebook as I believe it's Sweet Ellabella. Just search Sweet Ellabella and it should look just like the other stuff. And then I started doing some shorts on YouTube.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, those are the places. And then my Spousely store. So if you want to also, um, buy something from me, but also buy something from another military spouse and have it all in one cart, I've got Spousely store as well.
Sweet. Well, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And for anybody listening in, if you have suggestions for Nicole on things she can think about or things she could think about, please go ahead and go on to our YouTube channel and add some comments for her. And thank you, everyone. And we'll see you next time.